Luffy lost his brother at Marineford because he was weak. But what if that weakness no longer existed? What if Luffy awakened Gear 5 before the war began? If Luffy had reached his peak during Marineford, how would the battle and the entire story of One Piece have changed? Sabaody Archipelago had fallen into chaos once the worst generation gathered there. But everything truly spiraled out of control the moment a celestial dragon appeared. Without hesitation, Luffy struck him, a single punch that set off a chain of events that would shake the entire island. Attacking a celestial dragon was a crime punishable by death, and it guaranteed the arrival of an admiral. The Marines moved in immediately, and Admiral Kizaru soon arrived to clean up the situation. He wasn't alone. Pacifistas surrounded the pirates, closing in from every direction. The Straw Hats tried to fight back, but they were overwhelmed. Even together, they were outmatched, with the Pacifistas proving far too powerful. As Kizaru advanced, Bartholomew Kuma stepped in to hold him back. Then, one by one, the Straw Hats began to disappear. Luffy could only watch as his crew vanished before his eyes. In the end, the Straw Hats were scattered across the world. Luffy was the last to be sent away, landing on Rusukeina Island 3 days later. Zoro was sent to Kuraigana Island, where the world's strongest swordsman, Dracul Mihawk, resided. Nami arrived in Weatheria. Usopp was sent to the Boyne Archipelago. Sanji landed in Kamabaka Kingdom. Chopper was sent to the Torino Kingdom. Robin to Tequila Wolf. Frankie to Karakuri Island. And Brook found himself on Namakura Island. Each of them faced their own struggles, completely unaware of where the others had ended up. Luffy realized something was deeply wrong. What happened at Sabaody proved that he wasn't strong enough for what was coming, and if he wanted to protect anyone, he had to change. After arriving on Rusukeina Island, Luffy met Boa Hancock, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Through her, he gained the chance he needed. When Silver's Rayleigh appeared, Luffy didn't hesitate. He asked to be trained to become stronger than he ever had before. Luffy pushed himself beyond his limits every single day. Under Rayleigh's guidance, he learned the true nature of Haki and began mastering it. His body hardened, his senses sharpened, and his will grew stronger. Over time, that growth led him to unlock new forms of power, ones that pushed his devil fruit far beyond what it had been capable of before. This was the training that changed everything, the foundation that would eventually lead to the awakening of his devil fruit and the birth of Gear 5. During this time, Ace continued his hunt for Blackbeard, but the traitor pirate was nearly impossible to track, moving like a shadow and avoiding the world's eyes. Still, Ace refused to stop. As he searched, he trained relentlessly, growing stronger and sharpening his haki. He'd become a true powerhouse, though he relied more on his devil fruit still than his haki. Nearly 2 years later, Ace finally found him. Dark clouds loomed overhead as Ace narrowed down Blackbeard's location and confronted the man who had betrayed the Whitebeard pirates. There were no words that needed to be said. This meeting could only end one way. Ace clenched his fists as flames engulfed his body, wrapping around him like living fire. Blackbeard burst into laughter, his body trembling as darkness leaked from him, cracking the ground beneath his feet. Ace struck first, launching himself forward as flames exploded behind him, tearing through the rooftop beneath his feet. Blackbeard raised his arm, releasing a wall of darkness that swallowed the fire whole. But Ace didn't slow down. In an instant, he appeared in front of him, his haki-coated fist slamming into Blackbeard's jaw with enough force to send him flying into a massive boulder, shattering it completely. Blackbeard rose again, blood dripping from his lip. Grinning wider than ever, he answered by activating the dark fruit. Gravity twisted, the air thickened, and Ace was dragged toward him like metal to a magnet. Ace unleashed his Conqueror's Haki to resist, then blasted backward with an eruption of heat, breaking free if only for a moment. Using speed and observation Haki, Ace attacked again, narrowly dodging a sudden eruption of darkness that shot upward like spikes. He countered with a pillar of fire, melting the ground into glass beneath Blackbeard's feet. The damage showed. His clothes burned, his body was bruised. Ace followed up, coating his legs in armament hockey and launching a spinning kick that sent fire and pressure tearing across the battlefield. Blackbeard caught the flames with his darkened hand, absorbing the attack and pulling Ace toward him at the same time. Their fists collided with darkness against flame and hockey. The island trembled. Cracks split the ground for miles. Then Blackbeard cheated. He twisted Ace's center of gravity with his darkness. Ace staggered for a split second. That was all it took. A full force punch slammed into Ace's stomach, sending a shockwave through the air. Ace coughed blood, but refused to fall. In the end, both unleashed massive orbs of fire and darkness, crashing into each other. But when the dust settled, only one man was standing. Blackbeard had won, and Ace was captured. The news spread across the world like a storm. Portgas D. Ace had been captured by Blackbeard and handed over to the Marines. In exchange, Blackbeard was granted the title of Warlord of the Sea. But the most devastating part of all was yet to come. Ace was scheduled to be executed at Marineford. At the same time, Luffy was nearing the end of his training. The moment he learned about Ace's capture, everything else stopped mattering. But the same was not true for other crewmates. They were still training, and they didn't get the news fast enough to join their captain. They were all too far away to reunite and help their captain rescue his brother in Marineford. Luffy was with Boa Hancock when the news finally reached him. The moment he heard it, his hand tightened into a fist. His training had changed him. He was faster, tougher, and far more dangerous in battle. His control over hockey had grown tremendously, and with that strength, he believed he could still save his brother. The shift in him was immediate. The weight of the news did not break him, it hardened him. His presence grew heavy, dense, like the air itself was bending around his resolve. The reckless boy who once charged without thought was gone. In his place stood someone sharpened by survival, forged by loss, and driven by purpose. Luffy soon learned that Ace was being held in Impel down. Without hesitation, he asked Hancock for help getting there. With her assistance, Luffy sailed toward the Great Sea Prison and infiltrated what was said to be an inescapable fortress. The journey itself felt like a descent into something forbidden. The sea grew unnaturally calm as they crossed into the calm belt, its stillness more terrifying than any storm. Shadows moved beneath the surface, massive shapes gliding through the water. Sea kings circled like living walls, their presence alone enough to crush most ships. Impel Down stood in the middle of the calm belt, surrounded by violent currents and massive sea kings. Very few had ever escaped its depths. Getting inside was difficult, but breaking out would be far worse. The prison tower loomed above the sea like a blade driven into the world. Its walls were scarred by centuries of violence. Countless screams had been swallowed by its stone. This was not a place meant to be conquered. It was meant to erase people. With Hancock's help, Luffy entered the prison. From there, he pushed forward alone. The moment he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed. The air felt thick, heavy, with despair and hatred. Alarms erupted almost instantly. The prison reacted like a living organism sensing a foreign body. The lower guards fell quickly. The blue gorillas at the first level were taken down with single hockey-coated strikes. Luffy encountered Buggy along the way, who eagerly followed the chaos. But Luffy didn't slow down. Each step forward left destruction behind him. Walls cracked under the pressure of his movements. The blue gorillas never even had time to fully react. Limbs bent at impossible angles. Bodies slammed into iron bars hard enough to warp metal. Luffy moved like a force of nature, tearing through anything in its path. On the second level, the savage beasts were sent flying by powerful blows. The creatures lunged from cages and shadows alike, driven mad by hunger and rage. Luffy met them head-on. One was crushed into the ceiling with an upward strike. Another was planted into the floor with such force that the stone fractured outward in a spiderweb pattern. The beasts never slowed him down. They were obstacles, nothing more. On the third, Luffy charged straight through, leaping down toward the lower floors and leaving riots in his wake. Prisoners escaped, alarms rang out, and the disturbance quickly caught the attention of the prison's warden, Magellan. Cells burst open as Luffy passed, chains snapped, Prisoners flooded the halls like a tide. Panic spread upward through the prison levels. Impel Down had lost control, and it was only getting worse. By the time Luffy reached the 4th level, the heat from the burning floor cracked beneath his feet. Then the air changed. A thick poisonous fog filled the halls. Walls began to melt. The floor hissed. Magellan stood before him, venom dripping from his body like living armor. The poison warped the environment itself. Metal corroded. The stone softened. The air burdened with every breath. Even standing still was dangerous. The guards fled in panic, begging the warden to wait before unleashing his poison. Bon Clay tried to warn Luffy, but Luffy didn't hesitate. Nothing was stopping him now. The fight began instantly. Magellan summoned a massive poison hydra and hurled it forward. Luffy enlarged his arm with Gear 3, coating it in hockey, and smashed the attack apart, but poison still burned into his skin. Touching it was a mistake. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. The poison ate through his defenses like acid. Luffy's muscles screamed, but he pushed forward anyway, teeth clenched, refusing to give ground. Poison rained from above as Magellan lunged. Luffy stood his ground, then launched forward, his arm hardened with armament hockey. The punch landed squarely, sending poison splashing in all directions. Magellan slid back, but didn't fall. More venom flooded the area, coating the walls, the floor, even the air itself. Luffy leapt high, spinning midair, and slammed a kick downward. Poison erupted beneath him. He covered his mouth and pushed through the pain as Magellan unleashed a massive wave of liquid venom. Luffy flipped over it, landed behind him and struck again, only to be hit moments later by a poison-coated fist that sent him crashing through stone pillars. The impact shook the level. Pillars shattered. The burning floor split open. Even with hockey, the poison spread fast. Purple marks crawled across Luffy's skin. His breathing grew heavy. Still, he refused to fall. Luffy activated Gear 4th. His body expanded, steam hissing around him as hockey wrapped his form like armor. He bounced forward, dodging streams of poison and striking Magellan with overwhelming force. The floor shattered, walls exploded. Each blow carried enough force to tear the prison apart. Shockwaves rippled through the structure. Prisoners and guards alike were thrown off their feet just from the pressure of his movements. But Magellan endured. From the cracks in the ground, massive geysers of venom erupted, forming a colossal dragon of poison. Luffy tore through its head with a single punch, but the venom clung to him, burning deeper than before. Magellan appeared behind him and landed a devastating blow to Luffy's chest. Luffy slammed into the far wall. The poison spread rapidly. His strength faded. Gear 4 collapsed, and his body fell limp. Magellan mocked him and walked away, leaving Luffy drowning in venom. But Luffy didn't die. Bon Clay refused to abandon him, and Ivankov used their power to force Luffy's body to fight back. His immune system was pushed beyond its limits, breaking down and rebuilding itself again and again. The process lasted 10 brutal hours. His body shattered itself to survive. Cells died and regenerated. Pain became meaningless. Survival became instinct. At the very end, something strange happened. Luffy's heartbeat echoed differently, steady, heavy, like a drum. Something deep inside him stirred and then faded. When Luffy woke up, he knew he had wasted too much time. Ace was already gone. The prison was still in chaos. Smoke, poison, and destruction filled every corridor. As chaos erupted during the escape, Luffy freed Jinbei and Crocodile. But then, another presence appeared. Blackbeard. The air itself felt wrong. Gravity warped. Darkness pulled unnaturally around the intruder. Rage exploded inside Luffy. Without hesitation, he struck Blackbeard hard enough to send him crashing into the wall. Gear 4th followed. Massive blows shook the prison as darkness and force collided. For a moment, it looked like Luffy could win, but time ran out. Ace was being taken away. The clash fractured entire corridors. Walls collapsed. The prison groaned under the strain, but time was the enemy. As Magellan returned, coated in his most lethal poison, Luffy's anger peaked. His heartbeat began pounding like a drum. Conqueror's hockey burst from his body. His form changed to lighter, freer, unreal. The pressure alone crushed weaker guards unconscious. Stone bent, reality warped. Luffy had awakened something new. Gear 5. Laughing as he moved, Luffy overwhelmed Magellan completely. Poison was thrown aside like nothing. The floor itself bent to his will. Luffy's movements defied logic. His body stretched, twisted, rebounded in impossible ways. Venom attacks curved away from him as if afraid to touch him. Every strike landed with exaggerated force, reality snapping back like rubber. Magellan unleashed everything. Waves of poison, dragons of venom, floods meant to erase entire levels. None of it mattered. Luffy grabbed the environment itself, bending the battlefield like a toy. Poison splashed harmlessly away. Attacks were flung back with absurd ease. With one final hockey-infused blow, the warden was crushed into the stone. The impact echoed through the entire prison. Impel Down fell silent for a moment. With Impel Down left in ruins behind him, Luffy set his course toward Marineford. The prison burned. The sea trembled. The world had felt it. Ace's execution awaited. Luffy felt something inside him change. His heartbeat shifted into a steady, echoing rhythm, like a drum beating through his chest. Steam burst from his body as his hair turned white, and the shift was so sudden that even the battlefield seemed to pause. Marines froze where they stood. The admirals narrowed their eyes. Whatever had just awakened did not exist moments ago. This was Gear 5. The air itself reacted. The pressure across Marineford warped, as if the battlefield had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ground beneath Luffy's feet without him moving at all. The sky above bent unnaturally, clouds stretching and distorting as though pulled by invisible strings. Even the sea surrounding the island trembled, its surface rippling in slow, unnatural waves that spread outward for miles. The battlefield no longer felt like a place of war. It felt like a stage where reality itself was about to be rewritten. Luffy stood there laughing, his posture loose, almost careless, yet every moment carried weight far beyond reason. His body no longer moved like flesh and bone alone. It moved like freedom given form. The rhythm of his heartbeat pulsed outward. Sinking with the broken terrain beneath him, Sakazuki struck first, unleashing a massive wave of magma meant to erase everything in front of him. The molten tide surged across the plaza, swallowing cannons, barricades, and marines. Stone evaporated on contact. Steel sagged and melted. The heat distorted the air into violent ripples that made the battlefield shimmer like a mirage. Luffy didn't dodge. He stepped into it. He reached forward and grabbed the molten flow with his bare hands, his fingers sinking into the magma that should have erased him instantly. The molten mass stretched unnaturally, elongating like rubber under his grip. With a sudden snap, Luffy flung it backward. The magma recoiled violently, compressed by a force it was never meant to endure. The backlash detonated across the plaza, erupting into a violent explosion of heat, steam, and shattered stone. Sakazuki was hurled backward, crashing through layers of reinforced walls, carving a scorched trench across Marineford. Entire sections of the battlefield collapsed inward, as if struck by a natural disaster. As the admiral stood back up, magma dripping from his body, the ground cracking beneath his feet, something unthinkable happened for the first time in the war. Sakazuki hesitated. The flames around him flared instinctively, but the certainty that had defined him wavered. For the first time, he was reacting instead of advancing. Luffy didn't move forward in a straight line. He didn't need to. His body rebounded off the ground, the air, and even collapsing debris, bouncing across the battlefield in erratic arcs. Stone warped like elastic beneath each step. The laws of momentum bent to his will. Cannon fire curved away mid-flight, shells twisting and spiraling harmlessly past him, as if reality itself refused to let them connect. Magma fists lashed out again, erupting from the ground and the air alike. But they missed. Luffy twisted his body in impossible ways, flattening, stretching, and snapping back in midair. Dodges became counters. Counters became devastating strikes. His arms elongated and recoiled with absurd force, slamming into Sakazuki's defenses faster than the eye could track. Each impact sent shockwaves rolling outward. Marines were flattened instantly. Siege weapons were torn from their mounts and flung aside like toys. Entire platoons were erased simply from the pressure of his movements. When Sakazuki hardened his magma and tried to press forward, bracing himself for direct combat, Luffy punched straight through it. The strike did not slow. Hardened magma shattered like brittle glass under the blow. Impact cracked the plaza open, splitting stone and earth apart. Sakazuki was sent flying backward again, skidding across the battlefield before slamming into a fractured wall buried beneath rubble and steam. From a distance, Marines realized the impossible was happening. The strongest admiral was losing ground and fast. Panic spread through the ranks. Commands overlapped, contradicted, and collapsed. The carefully constructed defenses of Marineford unraveled under the sheer unpredictability of Luffy's presence. Before Sakazuki could fully recover, Sengoku descended. His Buddha form emerged in a flash of golden light, towering over the battlefield with overwhelming authority. His massive palm crashed downward, with the intent to end the threat immediately. The strike carrying the weight of justice, command, and absolute force. Luffy jumped. He caught the strike mid-air. His body flattened and stretched beneath the crushing force, bending instead of breaking. The impact released a shockwave so violent that the ground split beneath them, sending jagged fissures racing across Marineford. Tidal waves surged outward from the island, crashing against nearby ships. Laughing, Luffy twisted his body midair, redirecting Sengoku's momentum sideways. The fleet admiral's massive golden form was hurled across the battlefield, slamming into the ground with catastrophic force. Stone ruptured. The earth folded inward. Sengoku skidded through debris, leaving a massive crater where he finally came to a halt. Garp clenched his fists as he watched. He had faced monsters before, legends, forces that shaped eras, but this presence was different. This was power without restraint, without fear, without hesitation. It wasn't domination, it was inevitability. Darkness surged across the battlefield as Blackbeard made his move. Gravity twisted violently as the ground tore free, dragged toward a growing mass of shadow. Buildings cracked and lifted. Ice shattered and collapsed inward. The pull intensified rapidly, threatening to swallow everything nearby into a collapsing void. Luffy turned toward the distortion. He sprang forward. The attack ended before it could fully begin. His fist expanded mid-swing, swelling larger than any strike before, growing beyond proportion and logic. The punch crashed into Blackbeard's face with a thunderous impact that collapsed the surrounding darkness inward on itself. Blackbeard was driven straight into the ground. The impact carved a massive crater that swallowed debris, shattered ice, and sent shockwaves rippling across the bay. The battlefield fell silent for a brief moment as dust and smoke engulfed everything. When Blackbeard emerged moments later, crawling from the crater, bloodied and shaken, the darkness around him recoiled. His confidence was gone. The realization was immediate. This was not power that could be stolen, suppressed, or controlled. Marineford began to collapse around them. Walls bent inward like softened clay. Ice sheets fractured and split apart. Towers crumbled. The sea rippled unnaturally, responding to the rhythm echoing from Luffy's chest like a living thing answering a call. Luffy bounced across the ruins, faster than any coordinated response could track. Vice Admirals rushed to intercept him and were swatted aside mid-attack. Their hockey shattered before it could stabilize. Giants charged forward only to be flattened with single, overwhelming blows, their massive forms crashing down like felled towers. Pacifistas fired beams that curved backward under Luffy's influence, detonating against their own armor. He tore through their bodies effortlessly, bending steel and circuitry with his bare hands. Wherever he landed, the fight ended. Entire fronts collapsed the moment he arrived. The battlefield stopped behaving like a battlefield. It became a playground for a force that no longer obeyed rules. Whitebeard watched in stunned silence. Even from a distance, the rhythm of that power pressed down on him. He felt it deep in his bones. The freedom, pressure, absolute dominance that didn't fight the world but bent it instead. Sakazuki attempted to rise again, magma erupting violently around him, but Luffy was already there. The ground stretched beneath Luffy's feet as he rebounded, appearing above the Admiral in an instant. A single downward strike drove Sakazuki into the fractured earth, burying him beneath layers of stone, magma, and steam. Sengoku struggled to regain control. His golden form cracked and battered. Luffy landed nearby, the impact bending the ground outward in a rippling wave. Sengoku attempted to rise again, but the pressure alone forced him back down. The sheer presence overwhelming even his immense strength. The rhythm of Luffy's heartbeat continued, echoing across Marineford like a living pulse. Each beat bent the battlefield further out of shape. The red sails appeared on the horizon. The color cut through the smoke and chaos instantly. Shang stepped onto the battlefield, his presence washing over the ruins like a stabilizing force. The oppressive tension snapped into silence. Marines stopped advancing, pirates halted mid-strike. The war froze. With Whitebeard still standing, Ace rescued, and Gear 5 Luffy laughing amid the ruins, the decision was made. The war ended not through victory or defeat, but through inevitability. The battlefield finally fell silent. Smoke drifted across shattered ground. The sea calmed. The sky slowly returned to its natural shape, though the scars remained. Luffy stood beside Ace, steam fading gradually from his body. The white glow dimmed, but the presence did not disappear. The drums in his chest quieted, but the rhythm lingered, etched into the air itself. Marineford lay in ruins, not just physically but symbolically. The balance of power had shattered. The age of certainty was over. That day Marineford had not simply lost a war. It had witnessed the birth of a god of freedom. Luffy already showed repeatedly that he was cut above the rest of the Straw Hats. But this legendary victory proved it again, and they showed that admiration when they reunited at Rayleigh's place. Ace is back in Whitebeard's crew, while Luffy with his crew continued his journey. Their high of victory carried them straight to Punk Hazard, an island turned into a graveyard by Caesar Clan's twisted experiments. The land itself was broken, half frozen, half burning, scarred by science that should never have existed. There, Luffy crossed paths with Trafalgar Law once again, and their alliance was renewed. This time Luffy moved with a different presence, faster, more decisive. When Caesar tried to hide behind the weapons, his gas and experiments, it didn't matter. Luffy tore straight through it all. Caesar Clown was exposed, his laboratory destroyed, and his plans reduced to nothing. Punk Hazard was left behind in ruins, and its twisted science buried under scorched earth as Luffy moved on, already pulling the world toward its next collapse. Then came Dressrosa, and with it Doflamingo, a warlord who believed himself untouchable, a king who thought his strengths controlled the world. The arrogance became his downfall. From the moment Luffy stepped onto the island, the balance was already shifting. Doflamingo's officers fell as his operations were exposed and dismantled. The Smile factory was destroyed and the underworld empire he had built in secret began to collapse. Law played his role in bringing the truth to light, but it was Luffy who faced Doflamingo directly. When the final battle began, it didn't last long. Doflamingo's power, his strings, and his control over Dressrosa meant nothing against Luffy's overwhelming strength. His defeat sent shockwaves through the world, shaking the foundations of the warlord system itself. When Sanji was summoned to Whole Cake Island, what began as a political trap quickly became a breaking point. Big Mom's forced marriage was meant to bind pirates, like pieces on a board, but Luffy refused to let his crew be used as leverage. Instead of sneaking in or negotiating, he walked straight into Total Land and shattered the illusion of safety that had protected Big Mom's empire for decades. The island reacted before its ruler did. Homies spiraled out of control, clouds twisted unnaturally, and the ground itself warped beneath Luffy's steps. Surveillance collapsed, snail communications failed, veteran fighters froze under a pressure they couldn't name. Total Land sensed something it could not reject. When Big Mom finally confronted him, Luffy answered with Gear 5. His heartbeat echoed like a drum across the island as the rules of battle dissolved. Lightning bent in his hands. Fire recoiled from his grip. Napoleon's blade warped uselessly. Every strike sent shockwaves through the island, tearing apart fortresses and collapsing entire regions. Big Mom poured her full might into the fight, but her strength, once absolute, began to rebound against her. Her commanders intervened and were erased just as quickly. Katakuri's future sight fractured under Gear 5's rhythm. Smoothie and Cracker were overwhelmed by the pressure alone. This was no longer a war of armies. It was a Yonko fighting something she could not dominate. The final clash ended it. One punch tore Big Mom from her throne and buried her deep beneath her own territory. Total Land fell silent. Her empire collapsed overnight. The underworld panicked and the balance of power broke once again. With a Yonko defeated inside their own domain, the world had no choice but to accept it. Monkey D. Luffy became an Emperor of the Sea. Before Luffy could leave, Whitebeard's ships arrived. Ace stood at their head, alongside Marco, sent to repay an old debt. Ace found his brother standing in the ruins of an emperor's territory and immediately understood what had changed. When Luffy named his next target, Kaido, Ace didn't hesitate. If the strongest creature in the world was next, they would face him together. Wano was already broken down when they arrived. Kaido's rule had turned the nation into a prison. But this time Luffy didn't come alone. The Whitebeard pirates struck openly, Marco's flames restoring allies as Ace tore through enemies. Wherever Luffy moved, resistance collapsed. Prison walls fell. Rebellion ignited. Kaido felt it from Onigashima before the battle even began. Their clash shook the sky. Kaido descended in dragon form, unleashing devastation, but Gear 5 met him head on. Every blow Kaido landed rebounded harder. Zoro proved the Emperor could bleed. Ace joined the fight, his flames burning brighter with every exchange. Together, the brothers forced Kaido beyond endurance. The final moments were catastrophic. Luffy's Conqueror-coded strike shattered Kaido from within as Ace's solar fire pierced through him. The strongest creature in the world fell from the sky, crashing into Onigashima and tearing the island apart. When the dust settled, silence followed. Wano was free. Kaido lay defeated. And standing above the ruin were Luffy and Ace, shoulder to shoulder. Two brothers who had ended an era. With two emperors now bound by blood, the seas would never return to balance. A new age had begun, and this time the world could feel it coming. If Luffy had Gear 5 during Marineford, he would have turned the world upside down, but what if Zoro was trained by Mihawk from episode 1?